Good morning. On a rather dreary day. I've got a bit of a cold, as you can probably tell. So if my voice goes down a bit and you can't hear it, just wave your hand and I'll blow it out more. Share my bacteria with you. Okay, so the focus that we have is clearing the clutter, finding different ways of attending to all the flotsam and jetsam that moves around inside us and can get in the way of having a more direct and immediate sense of who we are and how the world is. So perhaps we could just begin by allowing ourselves to arrive and settle, just sitting quietly, sit in a way that allows your skeleton, your spine to support you so that your muscles can relax. And you can take an external focus like a mark on the floor or the back of someone's head and just let your gaze rest there, or let the attention focus gently on the breath as it goes in and out of the nostrils. And with that as the focus for your attention, just very gently stay with it. And if you find your mind wandering off hither and thither, just very gently bring it back. It's not a very complex task, but somehow it seems a rather difficult one. Okay, so we do that for a while. Okay. Buddhism is a very ancient system and it has many different aspects to it. And in the time we've got available, I'll try to outline certain aspects in terms of particular ways of viewing the world with their associated meditations and looking at the kind of behavior that would go with them, and also the result that might arise from that. The purpose of all of these practices and ways of understanding the world is to make life easier. There is, I think, very little benefit in becoming a Buddhist, because it's just another thing. Most people are already members of lots of clubs and associations and have places of identity. Buddhist practice is designed to help us open up or deconstruct many of the encapsulating identities that we already have. It's a way of putting into question some of the identifications which are both reassuring and limiting, so that one can have, as it were, a different kind of reassurance that's free of limitation. So when people begin by taking refuge in the Buddha and the teachings and the sangha or the grouping of people who follow, this is not a way of joining in a particular set of belongings, a particular belief system. It's an invitation to engage in patterns of inquiry and to use that inquiry as a path of freedom. Whatever can free you can also imprison you. So it's very important to have a clear sense of what your motivation is. Dogmatic tendencies are very pervasive. We human beings can believe all sorts of things very easily. We invest our energy in them, whether these are political views, economic views, alliance to a particular golf club. It can be anything. And that very energy of identification means that situations which are naturally open and flowing like a river rapidly turn into a swamp. The difference between the fresh flowing water and the sinking feeling of the swamp is that one takes things too seriously, makes them over important, cuts them off from the rest of the context that they're in. And that overprivileging or attachment becomes then the basis for a feeling, I know who I am, I know what my life's all about, and this is solid and secure. But of course, life isn't very solid and secure. Things keep changing. And these changes are unstoppable. We're very lucky today to have a little baby. And, we have all sorts of words for baby. But babies are really ungraspable because day by day they're changing. Moment by moment they're changing. Babies show the very active, dynamic nature of existence. The baby's not very concerned about the past, doesn't have much sense of the future. It's just intrigued and interested by little random bits of what's going on. And so there's a kind of freshness in babies. Of course, we have to pay our income tax and work out where to park cars and so on, so we don't have the luxury of being like babies. But maybe we can find some of that freedom so that we can take the lineaments, the lines and constraints of our life and bring them more into freshness. And that's really what the path of Buddhism, certainly as I would understand it, is about. We often set up oppositions, reality and fantasy. And we think if we grow up, we have to be hard-nosed and we have to deal with life as it is, and it's tough and difficult and you have to struggle, and there's no point in getting lost in fantasies of how you would like your life to be. Well, clearly on a day-to-day pragmatic level, there's some truth in that. But perhaps everything that we encounter is an aspect of our own creativity. Each of us sitting in this room will be drawn to different things that are in the room, different paintings or statues, or looking at the shapes of other people's heads and perhaps wondering about their lives and so on. Each of us is moving into the world within particular patterns, within particular tendencies, which reveal our own unique, specific take. That is to say, we each get our own world. Some of what we bring into the world is not particularly helpful for us. And we would be better off in some ways by doing a bit of spring cleaning. And in some ways that's really what we're concerned with here, is to see that many of the things that we take to be essential are in fact contingent. They are dependent on causes and circumstances which change through time. Many of us carry inside us beliefs that were engendered during our childhood, but no longer particularly fit the world we live in, and yet we still adhere to them as if they are telling us the truth about our situation. So, attachment in Buddhism means that we take the freshness of creativity, that we, moment by moment, are co-constructing our world with whatever is arising, and start to see it instead of a ceaseless stream of events arising and passing, we see it ourselves as engaged with entities, with real things outside. So gradually, as the baby comes into language, it learns to say mum. And what does that mean? Does that mean the baby now recognizes that this is its mother, and the mother is a truly existing person? Or does it mean that the child is coming into a language game? That if it says mum, then mum feels dead chuffed and smiles at the baby, and the baby likes being smiled at, so the baby says mum again. And then everybody laughs. And so there's a reinforcement, but it's an enforcement of particular kinds of activity. That we participate in the world by moving in it, by finding particular scripts and lines which activate and bind us into other evolving factors. It's one of the basic points of Buddhism, as taught by Buddha Shakyamuni in his first teaching, that there are no entities. There are no truly self-existing phenomena. All that we see is being dynamically created in the moment that we perceive it. Now, this may seem a very strange notion. Some of you have been in this building before, and therefore it looks familiar. But, of course, it will have changed since the last time you were here. The familiarity of the building is based on the kind of distracted mental construal that allows us to ignore the things that don't fit in with our memory and reaffirm for us the certainty, yes, I've been here before. I know where the toilets are. I know where the kitchen is. But when you go into the kitchen, there's probably different plates laid out. There's different cups laid out. Maybe there's some marks on the wall. Maybe there's little pools of water. These weren't there last time. Oh, these are incidental things. The real basic building is the same. Underneath it, let's take away what we see, and then we'll know for sure on the basis of a construction in our own head. The most reliable things we have are our own thoughts. That is to say, everything changes, moment by moment. The phenomenology, the lived direct quality of our experience is changing, just as a baby's moving around, checking things out. We're a bit more discreet and sophisticated. We sort of don't look too much, because that would be rude. But we maintain a sense of who we are in relation to other people. We've learned the particular choreography of interaction. And yet, inside that, every moment is fresh. What isn't fresh is the narrative of the discourse running in our head, which runs coterminously at the same time, at the same moment. We have the freshness of our lived experience and the habitual insistence of the mental categories that we use to make sense of it. So we know the center. And it looks the same. The walls look pretty much the same. The lighting looks pretty much the same. So we give it the benefit of the doubt and we say, what is here fits in with the mental categories in my head. And as long as the world fits my categories, we say, the world's okay. Nothing to worry about. Which means then that our own mental categories become the limit of our existence. Because we have a selective attention looking at the world to find what will confirm and reassure us about the stability of our own categories. But these categories have to be enunciated. So, for example, if you have a tendency to worry, if you have a tendency to have negative thoughts, these thoughts don't happen just once a day or once a month. They come on a regular basis. And the reason they have to come on a regular basis is because they go on a regular basis. Thoughts don't come and stay. Thoughts are always changing. When you have a habitual thought, it means it's one which every time it comes, you believe it, you take it to be real, you take it to be giving you valid information about yourself. And so it starts to take on the form of a putrid duvet. It's like the little suck rags that babies can get into. They're like chomping on a bit of cloth, which after a while, as the saliva and the dried milk and so on starts to get a bit rancid, you want to wash. But it's very reassuring for the child because it's living in a world of heightened sensitivity to smell and to taste. It's not having a cognition. But we're the same. We may have a thought of self-hatred. We may think nobody likes us. We may think we're too fat, or we're not intelligent enough, or that we smoke cigarettes and we should give them up. And these thoughts can go round again and again and again, creating a sense of who we are. These repeated thoughts become the building blocks of our experience. Why do we believe them? Because we want to believe something. Why do we want to believe something? Because we use ideas and beliefs as the building blocks of the stability of our sense of self. The Buddha said three basic marks, or three basic aspects, and mark out and show the nature of all phenomena, everything that we experience, including ourselves. Everything is impermanent. Everything is devoid of inherent self-nature. and everything is suffering. What does it mean that everything is suffering? It means that the world evolves in ways which are not in our control. Babies wake in the middle of the night crying. This is a heartbreaking experience if you're the parent responsible. You do anything to help the baby not cry, but if they've got teeth coming through, that's part of life. They get growing pains, that's part of life. Then they go to kindergarten and someone pushes them over. And what are you going to do? You keep them at home to keep them safe, but then they don't learn very much. So they go back to the kindergarten again, somebody pushes them over. The fact is, in life, we are caught up with, we are interacting with situations which are dynamic and changing and beyond our control. But we find this very frightening. We imagine if only we exerted more control, we would make the world safer. But actually, what makes the world safer is more awareness, more attention to the actual complexity, rather than a dream, a fantasy, that difficulty and complexity could be removed. Because the waves of hatred which run through many, many human beings in particular create whole landscapes that are filled with landmines, that are the remnants of cluster shells in many, many countries across the world. There will never be as much money going into the removing of these foul weapons as there is into the manufacture of them. And the only thing that the young people who live in these countries can do is learn to be very attentive and very aware. But that's the same for all of us. Children have to be aware, if they're on their bicycle, to stop at the pavement and not zoom onto the road. When kids are running along the top of a wall, they have to be thoughtful. You know, what makes us safe is being mindful as we participate, to be able to see what is going on as it shows itself. It's very rare to encounter an event that you can really know what it's going to be before it arrives. There's always variation. Do you think that's true? Day by day, you go into work, something's happened. A colleague's off sick, so you can't do a joint bit of work together, or whatever it be. There's always fluctuations and movements in the field. And if we try to stabilize the situation, that effort itself becomes the cause of suffering. The fantasy that the world will be reliable is the basic cause of suffering. That's what it means when it says attachment is the cause of suffering. We become attached to an idea of stability when in fact everything is dynamic. The way to get free of a great deal of suffering is to accept that the world is indeed dynamic and not to be shocked and surprised that weird shit happens, because it's always going to happen. Disturbing things are always going to arrive. That is how it is. When we are at school and we read about history, we read about cataclysm after cataclysm. Wars go on, then invasion, then famines, then droughts, then the plague, then this, then that. That's what history is. It's not stable. Now people are very concerned about what's happening with the stock market and what's happening with the security of banks. It's always been like that. The stock market is never stable. The price of houses may go down. There could be a crash there. Where will you find stability? You have to attend to the evolving field. Because if you put your money in the post office and you put it in an account which isn't linked with inflation, then big turns in inflation can eat up all your money. That is to say, you can't fall asleep and think you'll be safe. And that's really the heart of the Buddha's teaching. It says, you better wake up. Because being asleep and cozy under the duvet is not really the best place to be. All you're doing is enjoying a pseudo-stability that will last for a while, and then some wind of fate will blow across you, and it will be gone. And if you've got so used to a situation of stability, if you're so adapted and you think that you know how things will be, then it's very shocking, very alarming when things suddenly change. When you find yourself being sick, for example, you might suddenly find yourself being made unemployed. So the central question is, what ground or what basis can I build my life on if inner thoughts and feelings and sensations and outer objects and situations are all impermanent and unreliable? What will I place the burden of my existence on? Well, before we look for something to support the weight of our existence, maybe we have to ask, why is our existence so heavy? Why are we looking for comfort and reassurance and security? What is it that makes just breathing in and breathing out so difficult? What makes freshness impossible? What is this construction of who we are based on habitual thoughts that gives us a sense of being strongly enmeshed in particular identities which don't have much flexibility to them? We want someone to make the world safe for us. And in Buddhism, on a general level, we take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and we believe that that will make our life better. But the way it makes life better is by saying, don't trust anything. What a terrible world if you didn't trust anything. Well, what does it mean to trust something? I don't have to look because I know where it is. I trust that how things were yesterday indicates how they'll be today. Now, in terms of knowing where the corner shop is, that's necessary. It would be a rather psychotic experience to be unclear on Tuesday where the shops were that you went in on Monday. But the shops may well be closed. If it's run by one person, they might be sick. They might have gone on holiday. We don't know. On the general abstract idea, we can have a sense that it might be the case, but we won't definitely know. We only know things when we're present with them. To imagine that they're there according to our mental construction when we're not there is a kind of omnipotence. This is why worry is such a waste of time. Because when we worry, we tend to worry about situations that aren't here. Because if a problematic situation is in front of your nose, you can act on it, and most situations either will quickly resolve themselves or kill you. So, what are you going to do? Worry, the preoccupation in maybe, perhaps, and should I, and how is it going to be, and all that sort of speculation is a way of filling the mental space, filling the experiential and existential space with stuff which is not really helpful. Because we actually have to see. It's the same with a small baby. You have to be with the baby. You can't just leave a baby and think it'll be fine. Babies need to be attended to because they are always moving. But that's the same with people. The thing about us as adults is that we've taken so much fear into us. We're so frightened of our own spontaneity. We're so neurotically entrapped that we lack the wide range of lived experience that's there as our potential, and we become reliably ourselves. So the people who know us can just know who we are, and we know who we are. I know what I like what I know. It's lovely. Well, it is lovely. But that's like a kid that only wants to eat fish fingers. You know, there are a lot more things in the world to eat. There are a lot more experiences. And in particular, there are many, many people who we encounter who we would be able to make real contact with if we allowed ourselves to be different. But as long as we have a very fixed sense of who we are and the range of our characteristics, that becomes an impediment to the possibility of compassionate, empathic engagement with others. So the clutter is the internal preoccupation with knowledge and information that seems to tell us how the world is, and in fact blinds us to the immediacy of being in the world with others. Which is why when we do the kind of meditation that we were doing at the beginning there, we experience many thoughts and feelings and sensations arising. Just because we want to calm the mind doesn't mean that it becomes calm. Why isn't the mind calm? Because we're alive. Your mind will never be calm. It's a bit of an illusion that you could be calm, because stuff's always going on. If you live in the world with others, things will always be happening to them. You know, your mum will get sick, or your kids will get crazy, or something will happen. There's always something going on. Anybody have a life free of stuff? So stuff is what we get. Therefore, turbulence is not something to be solved and got rid of. Turbulence is how life is. So a calm mind is a mind that can engage with turbulence without itself becoming turbulent. That's not the same as becoming dissociated or cut off. It's not that we have a buffer zone between ourselves and phenomena, but that we are very precisely connected with all these movements, but not investing the movements as having a strong sense of inherent self-nature. That is to say, we can start by thinking, I don't know who I am, and I don't have to know who I am, because the situation will show me who I am. Very often before people have children, they think, oh my God, what kind of mother am I going to be? Well, you won't know till you have a kid. And what kind of mother you'll be will change according to the age of the kid. Some people find very small babies very easy, some find them difficult. Some people find 4-year-olds very difficult, some people find them easy. And so your life will reveal itself to you. You can't know in advance. So if you can't know in advance, the only place really to be is just in the moment. In that moment, with as many resources as you can have, as many kinds of possibilities of relaxation, of focus, of playfulness, but which can be mobilized and let go of. Which is why in Buddhism there is a lot of teaching of different kinds of meditation techniques, with peaceful deities, with wrathful deities, meditation without form, with different kinds of form, offerings, prostrations, and so on. These are all methods. None of these things are true in themselves. They are like a kind of massage, because we are all dislocated from our own existence. We have various forms of sciatica and arthritis. Our joints are not flexible. We become frozen in habitual takes about who we are. And what all the meditation methods are designed to do is to loosen our joints so that we are supple, and so that moment by moment we can start to be fresh in the situation wherever we are. This is why many of the deities, the meditational forms that you find in Tibetan Buddhism, have many different forms. We talk of 21 taras. There are many, many forms of Chenrezig, many forms of Padmasambhava. These are designed to help us see it's an illusion to imagine you're just one thing. The person who becomes a mother or who becomes a father remains a woman, a man, a partner, a daughter, and so on. And when we encounter the various people in our lives, we manifest into these situations in different ways. This is wonderful. It's a very terrible thing to be authentic, to be always the same. Why should you be always the same? Gordon Brown looks pretty much always the same. And that looks like a rather dreary fate to have. George Bush is pretty much a man for all seasons. There's not much emotional range. And it's very interesting that so many politicians are like that. Tony Blair was very different. Tony Blair was much more labile, much more shifting in mood, playfully, playing with the energy that was around him, as was Bill Clinton. And the political field that's open up in these situations is incredibly different. If you think of Ronald Reagan, he's not showing all that much. And his reliability allows people who want reliability to project onto him that he has many, many more qualities than he actually had. But in terms of being alive, the question is always, who will I be today? How will I be? What is the determinant of how I manifest into the world? Traditionally in Buddhism, this is discussed in terms of karma. Karma means activity which creates patterns which then become strongly influential, if not determinant, of future situations. So our habits and tendencies mean that we move towards new situations in the shapes that have been developed in prior situations. We bring staleness and repetition into the moment of freshness. That's really all that karma means. That instead of seeing the immediacy, the shimmering, joyful openness of the situation and finding a flexible way to move with that, we import standard patterns and procedures from ourselves, and through our selective attention try to find a niche where we can resurrect or reconstruct that particular pattern. Does that seem familiar to you? And of course, it's always a double move. Everything in our world is paradoxical. There is a reassurance in it. There is a reassurance in knowing day by day, well, I know who I am. I know what kind of things I like. I know the food I like. I know the books I like. I know the things on television I like. There's nothing wrong with that if we can see that as a pattern. And if in the moment of the arising of the pattern, you have the sense, I freely give myself into that pattern. I choose today to be like this. If you go into a business meeting, you have to speak in a particular way. If you're playing golf with someone, you speak in another way. If you're sitting in a cafe having a chat with someone, you're speaking in a different way. In each of these, that can be a conscious gesture towards optimal contact with the other, and with that immediate shimmering sense of the evanescence, the arising and passing of everything that's occurring. So it becomes dynamic and radiant. This is the meaning of the word mandala. A mandala is a lived experience of the infinite perfection of each moment as it occurs. Everything is in its proper place. So in the Tibetan tradition, when you see paintings of mandalas, they're very regular. You know where exactly everything is, and yet it's without essence. It's without any inherent self-nature. Just as the baby is without inherent self-nature, the baby is forming itself according to the context. And how can we do that? What is it that gets in the way of our freshness? So, traditionally, according to the Dharma, this is due to attachment, and attachment forms on the basis of ignorance. Ignorance means not being present in the moment when everything is occurring and occurring and occurring. So if we are not present, then we are absent. And if we are absent, we are making mental constructs about a situation, which is not the same as openly participating in it. Just as if you're thinking about someone, that's very different from just being with them. When you're being with someone, it's very fresh. It may not be all that comfortable, but it's a bit naked, it's immediate. If you're thinking about someone, you can wrap them in all sorts of constructs in your own head, and you can make them for you, rather different, rather at odds with what they actually are for themselves or for other people. So, ignorance means not seeing what's there. By the door, there's the Tibetan Wheel of Life painted in a frame. You can see it when you go out in the break. And in that, it starts with, there are 12 patterns going round the circle. And the first one is a blind old woman who represents ignorance. She's a woman because women represent wisdom. And she's blind because she's lost that wisdom. The wisdom is still there, but somehow she can't see it. So ignorance is always a process. It's not a state. It's a process of ignoring what's there in front of our own nose. It's choosing to rest in assumptions, in predictions, in abstract mental concepts, rather than freshly encountering what's there. Now, when you freshly encounter things, you don't know. So there's a way in which wisdom, or the absence of ignorance, is naked because it's not about knowledge. Knowledge is an accumulation that allows us to know about things. So some people know a lot about car engines. Some people know a lot about architecture. Some people know a lot about painting these kind of tankas that are on the walls. All of this knowledge is useful, but it's in this form of a subject knowing about objects, knowing about particular things, about patterns and juxtapositions. You can never know yourself in that way. Why? Because you're not a thing. In a real sense, we can say there is no baby. This baby exists in lots of people's minds. Lots of people have ideas about the baby, but the baby's just babying. And the baby can never be caught by the ideas about it. People give the baby a name. After a while, the baby will learn its own name. But that name is plucked from the ether. And it becomes part of the baby, but the baby, in a real sense, has no name. Whatever you say about the baby is just something in the moment. It's happy, it's sad, it's energetic, it sleeps a lot, it won't settle, it's very placid. Whatever it is will be there for a while and then gone. It's exactly the same with ourselves. We run these storylines in our head about who we are, who other people are, how our lives should be, what we should be doing. What do we gain from that? It looks like we are intelligently informing ourselves about how the world is, and thereby making our situation stronger and clearer. So it looks like clarity, but it's actually a kind of confusion. Because all the things that we tell ourselves about ourselves are impermanent. If you think back in your own life, when you were 5, when you were 10, when you were 15, when you were 20, you think about the enthusiasms you had, the toys you had, the friends you had. Mainly they're gone. All the people that you have been, you no longer are. There are some traces, some tendencies. You might meet an old friend and talk about a period 20 years ago, and it comes alive for a bit, but it's gone. You can't hang on to it. You can't go back into it. So, the more we rely on knowledge and constructs, the more reassured we become, the more intelligent and knowledgeable and powerful we appear to be. But what we're doing is creating a wall which makes the direct presence of being ourselves in the moment invisible. We're closing the door because all our perception is going out into the world. Which is why in this wheel of life, the second aspect is shown by a potter's wheel. The potter is turning the wheel with a big lump of clay on it. On the top of this clay, he's making little cups, and then he's cutting them off with a piece of wire. He's making things. And small children become desperate to know things. They go to school and they need to find out what other kids know, and they need to know the same. If the school's into football, then they need to know about football. And then they need to have what other kids have, because their attention is turned towards a world that says you are what you have, that essentially you are a construct. We're constructed out of our culture, the language we speak, the socio-economic background of our parents, the kind of educational possibilities that unfold, and so on. Out of the happenstance of our lives, maybe being sick as a child, maybe always being healthy as a child, we get a sense of who we are, and that's us. And somebody says, tell me about yourself. And we say, oh, I was born in da-da-da, and we give them a little potted history, because we're telling them about ourselves. But when you tell someone about yourself, do you learn anything about yourself? Do they really learn anything about you? They are being inducted into a narrative that you're selling. You're saying, please see me in this way. Don't see me in any other way, because I am a second-hand car salesman. And I can assure you that this has only had one owner, a very careful owner. It's an excellent vehicle. And if you were to hitch your wagon to it, you'd be doing fine. And in that way, the more we tell the truth about ourselves, the more we're lying and cheating to ourselves. I don't know if that makes sense. It means that the immediate freshness of an awareness in which we're just here, it's very open, naked, fresh, spontaneous, is covered over by our intoxication with these stories. So a great deal of Buddhist practice is designed to free us from these stories. Not so that we can never tell them, but when we tell them, we can start to experience them as rippling, shimmering flows of energy which move through the world and are beautifully connective with other people's stories, but don't establish anything in truth. They are simply communicative games, moves of the endless circulation of getting close, going apart, the pulsations of the universe, being connected, not being connected. So, for example, in the Tibetan tantric system, very often we visualize rays of light spreading out from our heart out to all the Buddhas. Then the Buddhas send light down to us. Then we send light down into the beings in the hell realms and in the other realms. These are all gestures of communication to give us the sense that there are no fixed entities. There are no Buddhas. Buddhas are sites of responsiveness. We ourselves are sites of responsiveness. What limits our responsiveness is having a sense of who we are. Because then we say, oh, I couldn't do that. Oh, no, I don't do that. Why not? But I don't. I wouldn't like to. I wouldn't be me if I did that. Who would you be? I don't know. I don't want to find out. I'm just me. In that way, the range of possibilities of ourselves is greatly diminished. And, that's why babies are very wonderful in all sorts of ways, because the baby calls the mother into being other than she was before. The woman can't be the same as she was before because she's got to become something else. And it's a wonderful thing in life if we so open from our hearts to other people that we're ceaselessly being called upon to become someone else. This is why wisdom and compassion are inseparable. Compassion means seeing the actual lived situation of the other and then finding a way of responding. And if the other determines how we're going to be, then the other becomes the door to liberation from ourselves. The one who holds the key to the prison of ourselves is the other person. As soon as you forget yourself and make a gesture towards the other, you suddenly find that you're different. Maybe a friend's not well, and you go with them to the hospital, and you sit with them as they go through unpleasant procedures. And it awakens all sorts of thoughts about your own mortality and the fragility of life. That wouldn't have happened if you were just sitting at home watching the telly. But your hope for them or your commitment to them takes you into a place that you wouldn't want to go, but in that new place you become somebody else. Then afterwards, your range, your repertoire of movements as a person is now increased. Isn't that an amazing thing? So self-protection is death. That's one of the central ideas of the understanding of ignorance. That when we try not just to ignore the ground of our own being, to ignore who we really are, but we ignore the actual situations around us and we protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe, our world becomes shrunken, diminished, maybe very predictable, but without much real clear movement. Now, as soon as we start to meditate, we see that our minds are changing and moving all the time. So our immediate experience is dynamic, but the constructs, the self-protective constructs that we have are not dynamic. We seek to impose a stability on a world which is dynamic. That is like the potter's wheel. He's taking the clay which has potential, the clay which can form in any way, and he's making a particular product. He's constructing something, he's making an image. Now we can be infinite images. Each human being, in fact each dog and each cat, can be many different things. Dogs respond incredibly to the environment around them, as do pigs, as do cows. All living things are very interactive. So our karma is not something inside us determining us like a computer chip. Our karma is our luck of the environment we're in. And this is a radically different way of thinking about it, because it means that the people who cause us trouble and difficulty are the people who open doors to us. Because when people give us a hard time, they invite us to think about how we have constructed ourselves in that particular shape. What is it about me that finds this person so awful? It doesn't mean that we have to do what everybody wants, but just we can see, oh, this discomfort is the felt sense of the pressure of the other person's shape on my shape. I don't want to have anything more to do with them. Okay? Then I'm saying, I like my shape. If I try to hang out with them, maybe my shape gets changed. There's this famous story of an Indian scholar called Atisha, who went to Tibet. Many of you will know this story. And he took with him a cook. And this cook was very rude and burnt the food a lot and would insult the teacher. And someone said to him, "You're in Tibet now, why do you have to keep this cook?" And he said, "Oh, he's my teacher." Because everybody was saying to Atisha, "Oh, you're a very enlightened person, you're a great scholar, you know everything." And the cook saying, "Oh, you're a pile of shit." And that's very precious in life. Somebody who looks at the shadow and sees something. And in that way, our enemies are our best friends, as Shantideva says, because they show us our anger, they show us our limitations. And in that moment, we can see, oh, if only I could control the other person, I would feel safe. But the other person is an invitation for me to learn some new moves. The desire to kill off the other is quite prevalent in the world. We can see this between different races, between different religions. When there are genocides and holocausts, these are generally based on the idea that we know where badness is located. It's located in people other than us, And if only we can get rid of all of them, then our life will be better. The fear of complexity means that we would homogenize everything in order to feel safe. But then we would just be bored stupid. So, how to live with difference, how to live with complexity, how to live with people who won't fit into our templates, our schemas, our maps. Clearly we have to be flexible. What gets in the way of flexibility is ignorance, attachment, and this way of habitually constructing the same kinds of phenomena. And the function of meditation is to help us to calm a little bit, have a time out from our obsessive focus on external objects and managing and manipulating them, so that we can attend to the process of our lived experience. And at first, just start to notice, how am I? We often, when we meet people, say, how are you? But it's not really an invitation for them to sit down and meditate and after 15 minutes to say, well, I noticed some little sensation. We expect a rather socially attuned response. And it's actually a way of saying, please tell me that you're okay so I don't have to be worried about you. But if we really think, how am I? Not in the sense of doing an accountant audit, not in the sense of adding up the scores on a scale of 1 to 10, but really of moment by moment think, how does this thing that I call myself, how is this, how is it? And if we really start to be present with ourselves as we how, we may find that it's very different from what it appears to be when we ask what. What am I? Who am I? These kinds of questions often take us into some kind of summative, some kind of added together notion. We can give an account of ourselves. But all the things that we say about ourselves are a way of avoiding the how. For example, I often have to mark the case studies of trainee psychotherapists. And they write these, quite long, maybe 10,000 word case studies. And so often they will begin in a very clumping way. They'll take a kind of overall view. John is a 42-year-old man who came for therapy because of this and this. He grew up in a family like this and this and this. What they don't say is, before I saw John for the first time, I had a feeling of dread. I looked at the referral letter and I thought, my God, he's going to be like my dad. And, when John came into the room, he looked at me in a way that made me want to slap him or whatever. Because that's the how, isn't it? That's the how of being with the person. That's actually what's there. Once you make the storyline, you've lost that. It's all made very nice and pretty. But real engagement with real people is very strange, isn't it? It's very unsettling. We have all sorts of fantasies, hateful fantasies, erotic fantasies. We get bored, we cut off, but then we want to present it as if we're always there, giving this perfectly balanced attention, and we're really interested in the person. We might be sitting there thinking about our meal in the evening. Do I want the chicken? I'm not sure. That's what really happens. But it's very rare for people to be honest. It's the same in meditation. What actually happens? Now, if we have a fantasy that our mind should be calm and clear, that we should be free of enmeshment with thoughts, we're very likely to be pumping that story forward and then either cheating ourselves because we're riding into battle under this banner, or we're going to beat ourselves up because we haven't achieved the goal that we imagined was the case, but we haven't actually checked out if anyone else can do it. Everyone else is happy. Oh, I better be happy too. How are you? I'm fine. But maybe nobody's fine. Why should they be fine? But we want to be fine. So lying to ourselves, cheating ourselves, lying to others, cheating others, is part of the glue of what in Buddhism is called samsara. And people are not doing this lying and cheating because they have a fundamentally bad intention, but because they bought into the notion life is stable, life is predictable, I have to be able to give a coherent account of who I am because everybody else is coherent. Everybody else knows who they are. I better not be the only one that feels weird all the time. But we feel weird in our bodies, don't they? You wake up, I woke up this morning, I had all this phlegm. Wow, what's this? I'm full of this weird, slimy green stuff. Isn't that amazing? That's me. Very interesting. So I'm not who I think I am. And in the same way in meditation, you can realize that your mind is full of weird green stuff as well. All sorts of slimy thoughts, lazinesses, angers, and hatreds. Is that interesting or not? We can't be interested in it if we think it shouldn't be there. So it's, for beginning meditation, it's very, very important to allow ourselves just to be curious, in the way a baby is curious. A baby will touch anything as it starts to move around, smelling things, putting it in its mouth when it's in that phase. In a sense, we need to be the same, trying to approach the world without judgment, without knowledge, but with a deep, profound welcome and acceptance and curiosity. And then we start to experience directly just how dynamic everything is. That there is no stability. And that when we look around and we see people out doing their Christmas shopping and wanting things to be very nice, we can feel some compassion for them. Because their lives are going by searching for money to make nice things for other people, to make other people happy. But it doesn't really make us happy. Because having more objects doesn't really do the business. We live as subjects. We live as an awareness, as a presence. And if we are convoluted into our thoughts, if we are enveloped by habitual patterns, then it doesn't matter if you get a very nice Christmas present, because you won't be there to receive it. How often in our life, when we've had a moment when we should be doing that, maybe on a birthday, we're not really there. We're caught up in our doubts or worries. Our habitual preoccupations mean that we can't just be naked and present. So the best present you can give yourself is the wisdom of allowing yourself to be as naked as possible. Not cooking your thoughts, not improving yourself,